Hello YouTube. So in this video I will be starting off on looking at the patriarchs, starting with of course Abraham, since he's the first patriarch. In the previous video I looked at the descendants of Noah and a couple of stories that occurred between the time of Noah and the time we first get a mention of Abraham. Here's the link to that video if you want to go back and watch it. Now I'll be starting off looking at Abraham's story. The first mention we get of Abraham is in Ur, called Ur of the Chaldeans, and Abraham at this time is called Abram. The Chaldeans weren't officially a group until at least around 1000 BC. Abram and his family, his father Terah, and his nephew Lot moved to a city called Haran, interestingly the same name as Abram's brother that died in Ur. It seems like Terah, Abram's father, and his family had a plan all along to go to Canaan, before there was any mention of God telling Abraham to do it. And as we can see by this passage, God makes his promise and Abram takes his family to Canaan, where the Canaanite was in the land. Kind of interesting considering that according to tradition, Moses was the author of the books Genesis through Deuteronomy, and according to later books, the Canaanites were very much still in the land when Moses was supposedly alive. It would only make sense to mention that Canaanites were in the land if they were no longer in the land when the author or authors wrote the text. Anyway, God promises to give the land to Abram's seed, and then a famine occurs, which forces Abram and his wife to go to Egypt. Abram tells his wife Sarai to call him her brother rather than her husband so the Egyptians won't kill him. And it's not exactly a lie because technically they are, I guess, brother and sister. The ruse is successful up to a point because Abram is able to get silver, gold, and herds, but then plagues supposedly hit Pharaoh's house, so Pharaoh forces Abram and Sarai to leave. Abram moves back to Bethel, where his and Lot's men quarrel, so Lot is forced to move to the plain of Jordan near Sodom, where the men were apparently already bad, and there's no mention of what the women and children were like. Chapter 13 ends with God promising once again to bless Abram with children and to give the land he was on to his kids and to make his seed like the dust of the earth. Several kings of the land fight a king named Chedorlaomer and are losing badly, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the aftermath, Lot is captured and taken away. Abram is informed of this and goes to rescue his nephew. Interesting, there's already a place called Dan in this part of Genesis when Jacob's son Dan hasn't been born yet. Or has he? I don't know. Abram rescues his nephew and the other men taken and is blessed by the king of Salem, which will later become known as Jerusalem. Then in chapter 15, Yahweh makes a promise to Abram a third time that he will have children and they will inherit the land. A prophecy is even made concerning the slavery in Egypt, which would be an easy prophecy to write about after the fact. Meanwhile, Sarai gets tired of waiting for a child and gives her maidservant Hagar to Abram, who seems to happily accept. Hagar finds out she's pregnant, despises Sarai, and winds up running away, briefly. Yahweh gives Abram the name Abraham and Sarai the name Sarah. He also tells Abraham to get himself and all the men of his household and all his children in the household circumcised. Some time passes and Abram gets visited by 3 men who turn out to be Yahweh and 2 angels on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah. Yahweh lets Abraham know what they're planning and makes a deal with Abraham that he won't destroy the city on account of 10 good men. No mention of women again. Lot is sitting at the gate of Sodom and insists the 2 angels stay in his home. A mob descends on Lot's house, demanding to know the 2 men, or angels. Lot refuses to give them over to the mob and instead offers his daughters. The mob refuses and presses in on Lot. The angels blind the mob and lets Lot get out of the city in a hurry, which he does. Lot's wife gets turned into a pillar of salt, and Lot gets so scared for his own life that he winds up living in a cave. His daughters assume no other men are around to have children with, so they get their own father drunk and have sons by him. These sons, according to Genesis, wind up being the forefathers of the Moabites and the Ammonites. There's another scenario in chapter 19 of the book of Judges that's very similar to this account, where the tribe of Benjamin engages in a similar type of behavior. In that time, the men raped a woman and she died, and most of the tribe of Benjamin was destroyed. It could be that the biblical authors could have used material from a later event to describe an earlier event, or vice versa. I think the former is more likely, as the later event would be more easily remembered than an earlier event, and an author could have easily written in some details of the Benjamite rape story as a warning for such a crime. It's quite possible there were cities named Sodom and Gomorrah that met with catastrophe, and this catastrophe stayed in the minds of the local people until the story was written down. It's possible that such a story did happen exactly as described, and I think it's equally likely that the old catastrophe story was put together with a later horrific rape story. So moving on with the story of Abraham. Abraham moves to Gerar and tells Abimelech, whom we later learn is the king of the Philistines, that his wife is his sister, and Abimelech seeks to procure Sarah as his wife. So Abraham and his sister/wife pull the same wool over Abimelech's eyes that they pulled over the eyes of the king of Egypt, and are rewarded handsomely, quite handsomely, for doing so. Just want to pause here and point out the Philistines did not occupy any part of Canaan until after 1200 BC, and remained until well into the time of the Assyrian dominance in the area. According to archaeological evidence, the city of Gerar is shown to have been in a, quote, insignificant village until the late 8th and 7th centuries BC. I also want to take the time to point out something I first noticed in the New World Translation, but not the King James Version of the Bible. I did check a direct Hebrew to English translation, the link to which I will provide down below, and it tends to agree more with the New World Translation. It looks like the scribes that wrote the King James Bible were trying to cover up a perceived mistake. I mean, that's how it looks. In Exodus, there is a verse where Yahweh is speaking with Moses. He says in Exodus chapter 6, verse 3, quote, "And I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah, or Yahweh, was I not known to them." End quote. Why am I bringing this up now? Because this is either a mistake in punctuation or reading comprehension, where this statement was actually a question, or more likely it's a contradiction of earlier verses concerning the patriarchs in Genesis. Exodus chapter 6 verse 3 reads like a statement and not a question, which is why I believe this. These are the verses I found either where each of the patriarchs mentioned Yahweh by name, or where Yahweh mentions himself by name to the patriarchs. This small list does not include all the instances where the author or authors narrating the stories of the patriarchs mention Yahweh by name as well. This can be viewed potentially as another proof that Moses could not have written all the books from Genesis to Deuteronomy. I do not think a single author would have made such a goof.